done to Janet. That somebody was not going to get away with murder, and that to continue to seek the information, to continue the investigation, and to give us some sense of closure.
In 1996, the case was handed over to Maine State Police Detective Mike Mitchell. After reviewing the case files, Mitchell paid a visit to Janet Baxter's parents.
Detective Mike Mitchell, how do you do? Police.
The detective had grown up near Norridge Walk and had been in elementary school when the murder occurred.
Mr. McClary, Mrs. McClary, I'm a detective with the Maine State Police, and I just want
He promised he would do everything in his power to solve this case.
if you have any questions of me, don't hesitate to call.
Mitchell began by retracing the steps of the previous investigation. He was struck by the loose end presented by the owner of the yellow Volkswagen, Galen Lassard, and his cronies, who refused to talk to police. Despite those unresolved issues, he decided to take another crack at Albert Cochran.
Some detectives felt that Albert Patrick Cochran was a suspect and was the person responsible for the murder of Janet Baxter. Some detectives felt that it was another group of people that socialized together. So what I did is I took down all the names of all possible suspects that hadn't been alibied, not to have been in the area at the time, and listed them all down on a piece of paper, and by priority as to who looked like a better suspect than the others. And Albert Patrick Cochran was on the top of the list.
To make his case, Mitchell first had to inventory what evidence had survived over the years. He contacted Maine State Police forensic chemist Chris Montagna.
My two roles were to see what was still around as far as evidence that had survived 20 years, and second, to reconstruct the notes and the work that had been done 20 years earlier and try and piece all of that together and link it to a suspect that Detective Mitchell was working on as the murderer of Janet Baxter.
Let's see what we've got.
Searching through the boxes of evidence, investigators found the original slide mailers. One looked blank, but was thought to possibly contain swabs of biological evidence from the victim's body. If the evidence had remained intact, it might be possible to extract DNA, a technique not in existence 20 years before. Under the microscope, the slides surprised everyone, revealing the presence of biological evidence removed from Janet Baxter. Now, investigators needed to find a DNA sample from Cochran. They did not have to go far to find what they needed. The sample of Cochran's hair collected in 1976 was also preserved in the file. But would the hair have viable material for DNA testing? Forensic DNA specialist David Munich was given the assignment.
These head hair samples were known head hair samples. When they're collected, they're actually plucked from the head, and they have skin attached to the hair root, as opposed to hairs that are cut or hairs that just naturally fall out of your head.
Both samples provided ample material to perform the DNA test. When the tests were concluded and the comparisons made, the results were overwhelming. The DNA tests showed there was only one chance in 37 billion that Janet Baxter's killer was somebody other than Albert Cochran. Munich called Detective Mitchell with the news.
When it came back a perfect match, I can remember I was driving down the road, I picked up my car phone, and I just couldn't believe it. My eyes filled up with water thinking that it was, something you'll never forget. It's going to be March 17th, 1938. He's about 62 years old. This is something.
But where was Albert Cochran?
C-H-R-A-N.
Computer checks tracked him down to an address in Stuart, Florida. On the morning of March 17th, 1998, Detective Mitchell and Florida police arrested Cochran at his home. He was extradited to Maine to stand trial for the murder of Janet Baxter. Based on the evidence gathered over 21 years earlier, detectives believe Cochran had seen Janet Baxter alone in a deserted grocery store parking lot. His prior history of violence reasserting itself, Cochran seized the opportunity to abduct his victim, later raping and killing her. On May 20th, 1999, it took a jury only 2.5 hours to find Albert Cochran guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, this time without the possibility of parole. Murder is not the only cold-blooded crime. In South Dakota, a mother's only son is held for ransom.
Have you or a loved one been diagnosed with any type of lung cancer? Even if you smoked, your lung cancer may be the result of exposure to asbestos, and you may be entitled to significant compensation. In many cases, companies knew the risks of asbestos exposure and that it was significantly more dangerous for smokers, but did not protect their workers. Who do you call for the legal assistance you need? You call the law firm that has the experience, support staff, and resources to fight for asbestos victims diagnosed with mesothelioma and lung cancer, even smokers whose risk factor is 50 times that of non-smokers. With decades of combined experience, they're here to determine if and when you were exposed to asbestos and who should compensate you. If you or a loved one have been diagnosed with lung cancer or mesothelioma, call for more information and a free case review. You don't pay anything unless they win. Call now.
Daily look is my style, my way. My personal stylist makes sure I love how I look in styles that work just for me. That's why the fit is perfect, the quality is incredible, and the style is 100% me. Visit dailylook.com now to start your style profile.
Attention cancer victims who use the weed killer Roundup. A federal jury unanimously found that Monsanto's popular weed killer Roundup was a substantial factor in causing cancer. You may be entitled to substantial compensation. If you or someone you love used Roundup and were diagnosed with cancer, call the number on your screen now. Don't wait. There may be time deadlines to file a claim. Call 800-321-1569. That's 800-321-1569.
Aberdeen, South Dakota, May 8th, 1985. 20-year-old Michael Kinney left the home he shared with his mother, Sandra McNeil, to attend classes at Northern State College.
I'm working hard on it. All right, I'll be back. Bye.
When Michael didn't return by the following morning, his mother became concerned. She decided to look for her son. Near the house, she found Michael's car parked on the side of the road. Michael was nowhere in sight. Sandra McNeil contacted the sheriff's office. Brown County Sheriff Mark Milburn was assigned to look into the disappearance.
We had some concerns due to the fact that Michael Kinney's car was found across the roadway from his residence and had been parked there for, we're assuming, anywhere from 24 to probably 35 hours, 36.
The following day, Sandra McNeil received a mysterious phone call from an unidentified man. The caller told her to go to a bar in Aberdeen later that evening and look for an envelope under the payphone if she wanted to find out what happened to her son. She was told not to contact the police. Kinney's mother went to the bar and found an envelope hidden beneath the payphone. Inside was a ransom note demanding $200,000 in exchange for her son. At the kidnapper's warning, Sandra McNeil gave the note to sheriff's investigators, who examined it for clues. South Dakota Department of Criminal Investigations agent Doug Lake was brought in to assist with the investigation. His first priority was to deal with the difficulties of obtaining the money.
The ransom money was the victim's mother's money, and it was on Friday after the bank is closed, and the agents, the investigators went around to the different banks in town and gathered up all the cash that they had on hand.
3 days after her son disappeared, Kinney's mother received a second phone call. This time, investigators were listening. Sandra McNeil was instructed to leave the money in Aberdeen Park at 9 p.m. Investigators traced the call to a public phone box, but the kidnapper hung up and disappeared before the police could close in. The phone had been wiped clean of prints. Investigators studied the tape. The caller stated Michael was not hurt, but refused to allow him to talk to his mother until the ransom was paid. The kidnapper described Michael's clothing to authenticate his threat. Investigators felt they had no choice but to follow the kidnapper's demands. The money for the ransom was bundled and placed into a briefcase. Investigators also placed a hidden tracking device inside. An undercover female police officer made the ransom drop as scheduled. A short while later, the briefcase was retrieved by a man who then ran off with more than he bargained for. Police quickly followed. The suspect drove to a residence where he parked the blue Oldsmobile he was driving. Transferred the briefcase containing the ransom money to an orange Camaro and was joined by an unidentified female from inside the residence. Led by the tracking device, agents followed the suspects across the Minnesota border. Just inside Minnesota, a roadblock halted the suspect's flight. They were ordered out of their car and arrested. The driver was identified as 19-year-old Todd Miller. The passenger was his 17-year-old sister. Agents retrieved the briefcase from the Camaro's trunk. The car was closely examined for clues, but there was no sign of Michael Kinney or any other leads to his whereabouts.
I'm telling you the truth.
Investigators questioned the suspect separately. After a thorough interrogation, investigators found that Miller's sister genuinely appeared to have no clue about Kinney's disappearance or the ransom money. She was released. Todd Miller told police a drug dealer named Bob Jacobs had asked him to pick up a package and deliver it to him in Minnesota. Miller claimed that in return, Jacobs had promised to help him financially. When asked if he knew Kinney, Miller said he was a good friend, but he had no idea Jacobs' job was in any way related to Kinney's disappearance. Miller's story provided investigators with an opportunity. They would use him in a sting operation to nab the drug dealer. The ransom money was returned to him, and he was transported to the prearranged delivery point. Jacobs never appeared. following day, Miller admitted that Jacob's story was a lie. The kidnapping had been a hoax. Claiming it was all Michael Kinney's idea, Miller explained he had helped stage the entire plot. Miller said he had been friends with Kinney since high school. Alleging Kinney dabbled in various drugs and wanted to move to Canada, Miller stated he was recruited into the kidnapping scam as a way to help Kinney finance his planned relocation. Detectives put Miller through an extensive polygraph test.
Did you harm
The
Michael?
results of the test were inconclusive, but tended to show the overall truthfulness of his statements. That meant Michael Kinney was alive and on the run. A warrant was issued for his arrest.
The problem with traditional cotton sheets is that they trap heat and moisture.
That's not how you get a great night's sleep. So we invented Chic's Perform.
Every answer.
By that same technology.
I've had all but what I need, just more of you. Of things I've had my fill, and yet I hunger still. Empty and bare, Lord, hear my prayer. Oh, I have searched all around in the husk that abounds, but I find no nourishment there. You know, my strength, it's almost gone. Despair. Oh, but my thirst drives me on, and I'll stumble all along over ground so barren, so dry. Oh, but wait now. Oh, there's a spring up ahead. Yes, it is. Living water. Oh, fill me, I cry. With more of you.
Jesus.
I've had all but what I need, just more of you. Of things I've had my fill, and yet I hunger, thirst still. Empty and bare, Lord, hear my prayer. Oh,
With the mobile app, I can send funds, look
down with your backs to the board. I am then going to pose questions to the two of you in the middle. You search the board for that answer. If you find the right line, press your buzzer. If you are right, I will
And can be protected by MasterCard Zero Liability Protection. Join the millions of people who have trusted and enjoyed the convenience of NetSpend. There's no cost to order and there's no credit check to get started. So call now.
I get paid before just about everybody that I know. I am able to keep track of my money. I can set up budgets online. I just feel like it's just so customer based that there's no reason not to have it.
Order your NetSpend card now. Be one of the first 200 to order and choose your card color free.
I use my NetSpend card for everything.
Call 1-800-682-3025. That's 1-800-682-3025. Get your tax refund direct deposited to your NetSpend card account.
This is an important alert for anyone taking the HIV drugs Viriat, Truvada, Complera, Stribil, or Atripla. These drugs were originally approved to treat HIV-1. They are now known to have serious side effects. They include bone deterioration or bone fractures, chronic kidney disease, and even kidney failure. The makers of these HIV drugs knew about the serious problems and almost immediately crafted a safer drug without the known side effects. The problem is, they did not release the new and safer drug to the market until the patent ran out on their less safe HIV drugs. So for over 10 years, Viriat, Truvada, Complera, Stribil, and Atripla provided billions of dollars in profit while thousands of people became sick and suffered. The makers of these drugs placed profits over patient safety. It's time they're held accountable. If you've suffered the side effects of Viriat, Truvada, Complera, Stribil, or Atripla, call now for your free no-obligation case evaluation. Together we'll seek justice. Together we will make a difference.
Police in South Dakota continued their search for 20-year-old Michael Kinney. What had initially appeared to be a kidnapping was now starting to look like a deception.
Have anything to do with the disappearance?
Kinney's friend, Todd Miller, claimed to be a reluctant participant in helping Michael Kinney stage his own disappearance and extort his mother. As the result of Miller's story, a warrant was issued for Kinney's arrest, but his whereabouts remained a mystery. Detectives questioned Kinney's girlfriend. She told him she was with Michael the night before he was reported missing. He had dropped her off at her house after they had been out for a pizza and soda. She had not seen or heard from him since. Weeks later, an Aberdeen farmer made a startling discovery. After noticing a foul odor coming from an unused ice house on his property, he entered the building. There, he found a body. Police were immediately called to the scene. Though the body was badly decomposed, investigators found evidence of 3 bullet wounds and what appeared to be blunt trauma injuries to the victim's head. The farmer had no idea who the victim was or how the body ended up in the ice house. Through dental matches, police would soon learn the victim's identity. They had found Michael Kinney.
It was a big impact on us. All of a sudden we went from a possible theft by deception warrant to a kidnapping, murder, a homicide.
At the autopsy, the cause of death was determined to be a bullet wound to the aorta. Fibers, perhaps from a rug, were collected from the victim's clothing. It was estimated he had been dead for 2 to 3 weeks, possibly from the time of his disappearance. With Michael Kinney dead, the investigation shifted back to Todd Miller. For investigators, it was clear that he was the killer. But now they had to prove it. To determine if he had written the ransom note, he was returned to the police station to provide handwriting samples. While waiting for those results, warrants to search Miller's cars were obtained. Investigators discovered that the blue Oldsmobile Miller used to pick up the ransom money had been recently washed. However, detectives managed to find 2 hairs that had survived the cleaning. Fiber samples from the trunk were also collected. Next, the interior of the trunk was treated with luminol. This process revealed evidence of blood, but the samples were too deteriorated for analysis. Was hand-delivered to State Crime Lab analyst Rex Reese for comparison. Reese compared fibers removed from Kinney's clothing to those removed from the trunk of Miller's vehicle.
There was an association of the fibers that comprised the liner in the trunk and present as loose fibers on the metal part or the base bottom of the trunk itself. These were black rayon synthetic textile fibers that comprised this liner. Present on Mr. Kinney's clothing were a number of these same type of black fibers.
The Though the analysis was incriminating, it was only circumstantial. Investigators needed hard evidence that Michael Kinney had been in the trunk of Miller's car. Reese next compared the two hairs recovered from the Oldsmobile's trunk with those taken from Kinney's head during autopsy. But Reese could only make a general comparison. The hairs recovered from the trunk were too damaged for a conclusive analysis.
The hairs had been severed at the proximal end or near the scalp by blunt force, so we couldn't see any of the root structures there. But they exhibited human hair characteristics that were most similar to that of Mr. Kinney.
Reese's analysis brought investigators one step closer to making their case. But it still wasn't enough. Experts conducted an extensive examination of Miller's handwriting. The unique characteristics identified in the ransom note matched those from Miller's sample. Despite his protests, Miller was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Detectives determined that Miller had wanted to help his father get out of financial problems. He turned to the person he called his friend. On the night of May 8, 1985, Michael Kinney dropped off his girlfriend and headed back home. Police theorized that he was flagged down by his friend. Completely unaware of what was about to befall him, Kinney was an easy mark for the cold-blooded violence Miller had planned. After striking Kinney's head, Miller loaded him into the trunk of his car and quickly fled the scene. Miller drove to an isolated farm, where he then shot and killed the still unconscious Kinney. To cover his tracks, Miller hid the body in a derelict ice house. He then returned home and coldly set in motion his plans to extort Kinney's mother. At his trial, Tom Miller was found guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, possession of ransom money, and forgery. He received 2 life terms plus 20 years. In a community near Preston, Washington, another missing persons case was to turn deadly.
Many sunglasses may actually make it harder to see, and if they don't cut the road glare, it can be deadly. This is battle.
Clothing. What can you do?
Crusades, back to the motel room, and told my wife, I will not preach like that anymore. And yet, his word will burn in my heart until I cannot preach anything else. Just before this meeting, I was praying. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, last Thursday morning, and God literally tore my soul apart with great racking sobs as I saw this nation, as I guess I have not seen it previously, and he told me that I had no alternative or choice. If I desired to obey him, I must preach his word. And yet I know that it will not be received or accepted by most. The other day, I talked with a man that is 81 years young. He sat before me with tears in his eyes and told me, he said, Brother Swaggart, after having served 40 years as a missionary, as a medical missionary, he's an MD in Brazil. He said that about 18 months ago, God gave him a vision of heaven. And for 5.5 hours, he said he walked with Jesus in the portals of glory, and he asked the Lord, among many other things, about this great country of America. And And he said the Lord spoke to him and said, America must repent. If America does not repent, serious situations will develop. America must repent. Historians, when they look back into ancient dynasties, kingdoms, and empires, they basically use a criteria of 3 investigative areas to learn about the rise and the fall of respective empires. I stood the other day in Rome at the spot that we are told the mighty Roman Empire started, that ruled the world either from its western or eastern capital for nearly 1,500 years, and yet it fell. And historians tell us that these 3 areas of investigation, strangely enough, is art, sculptors, and literature. Art, sculpture, literature. They can investigate those things, and they...
While the 2 were working on the house they shared together, Wren left the residence so Marcel would cool off. When Wren returned later that night, Marcel shot him in the leg.
Oh my God!
Their son refused to press charges. The information was enough for police to open a missing persons investigation. A background check revealed that police had been dispatched to Marcel and Wren's residence several times before to settle angry disputes between the 2 men. On August 10th, a month after the shooting, Wren called 911 to file a formal complaint against Marcel for another incident. He had not been seen since. Assigned to the Major Crimes Unit of the King County Sheriff's Office, Detective Denny Gula